One method that they did was when one enslaved person did something wrong, they would not whip them in isolation. They would whip them in front of everyone. Like, they would use them as a way of, you do something wrong, this is you. And they created this insidious trauma onto everyone else. So I started connecting like, yo, why is it that all of these videos of black people being killed is so accessible? It's in our face 24/7. Why is this even being able to be shared on Facebook? Why is it when I go on CNN or whatever, I'm seeing the same freaking clip over and over and over? And then I'm getting riled up every time. I'm getting crying, and I'm like, there's something here that I feel is on purpose.
Brittany King, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you.
Of course. So if you guys you're listening to this and watching this, of course, but there is another about 30-minute portion of the conversation that we recorded last time that's specifically about Kid Cudi, about drinking, some other wild stuff, and that will be released along with this conversation, but it'll be separate. So you can see that on the YouTube channel or podcast. So just so you guys know, tuning in, that this is the folder length conversation now that we both have structurally sound Wi-Fi to complete this journey.
Thank you. Yeah, the episode's going to be good, so check that out.
Yes, of course. So I actually, last time, one of the things that I was about to get into with you is your comparison between Beethoven and Kid Cudi, because we spoke about Kid Cudi's artistry on the last portion of the conversation when we left off. And I wanted to actually start with an excerpt that you had written about Beethoven and how you have experienced Beethoven's art. And so you wrote in The Kids That Cudi Saved, which is the title of the article in Spin magazine. Shout out to Spin. You wrote that as Beethoven credits art as his reasoning from a fatal decision, perhaps it's much deeper than that. Maybe the power of music isn't just about how it makes us feel, but what it encourages us to ultimately understand. Can you explore the connection that you've felt with Beethoven, or that bridge that you saw between Beethoven and Kid Cudi that made you want to explore them in that same article?
Well, funny enough, when I was exploring Kid Cudi's impact on culture and music with mental health awareness, I was just thinking, like, this is something that's not just a contemporary phenomenon. I'm like, this is something that's had to have happened before. Like, this conversation, maybe in a different way, had to happen. And so I was researching and I came across Beethoven. I did remember hearing about Beethoven years back, how he suffered from depression and stuff, but I never dived as deep into it as I did this time. And when I did, I realized, wow, this person who is seen as one of the best composers of all time suffered with depression, suffered with suicidal thoughts, suffered with anxiety because of the fact that he had this ability to make music and he was gifted, but then he started losing his hearing. So he couldn't even hear the art he was making. And it made him very depressed, of course. It made him very, like, what's the point of living if I can't even experience the art I'm giving the world? And so when it was the art and the music that saved him, but then he said it was more so like his connection with God, I realized that there was something bigger here, and that perhaps if Beethoven, did decide to go the other route and not be inspired to stay alive by his music or God, look at all of the people now who were impacted by Beethoven's music that became musicians in their own right, down to the fact that even Nas sampled in I Can, one of the best rap songs that I love by him. He samples Beethoven's music, and the Beatles sampled Beethoven. I believe Jay-Z did. And there's so many like rappers, rock stars, country, like everyone sampled Beethoven. And I know Kid Cudi, I don't know if he sampled Beethoven, but he's talked about Beethoven and stuff. So all of these people inspired by this one man. And it was because of his choice to stay alive that he impacted the world in a world that he has never even seen. And Kid Cudi had that same impact. Kid Cudi didn't even know by staying alive, he was inspiring other people to stay alive.
Yeah, it seems like such a big accomplishment for Beethoven to just live a normal life, like an uneventful life with the cards that he was dealt with going deaf, and then also living in the time period where if you had a mental health problem, if you were depressed, if you were anxious, there's no one really that you can talk to about it, because people were more in the mindset that if you're, experiencing something in line with anxieties or panic attacks, voices, things like that, that was like witchcraft or just like this
Hysteria.
unknown shit. Yeah, like you could be like burnt alive or crucified, or like just like all this wild shit that people were doing back in the day to people who were expressing mental health problems. And the fact that he was losing his hearing and also is clearly in the very least mentally fatigued and probably maybe suffering from some sort of disorder like PTSD or anxiety disorder combination, like something too far outside of my expertise to speculate. He had both of those things he was dealing with, and then became one of the greatest composers, if not the greatest composer of all time.
Exactly. And I do believe in the piece I said he confided in his brothers. I don't know if it was like his actual brother or like if that was a figurative speech, like his brother, his friend, but it was in a letter. But even with that, like you're dealing with it in real time and you have to write it out in a letter and then you send it. You don't know if it even is going to get to the person. It's not going to come back right away. It's not like a text. Like now we have so much access to help. And he, one, like having the fear to say it because you don't know what someone will say, and then two, not immediate help. So there's a whole different element there that I found pretty fascinating too. So
yeah, getting left on red back then was way more intense than it is now. Like people get left on red for 4 minutes and they're like, my life is over. Back then back then you get left on red for 6 months. I went down to New Orleans late last year, around October last year, and there's so much mystery and dark magic about that city. And there are a lot of stories where people had to send letters and you would wait months to hear back and sometimes years to hear back in New Orleans. And there was one woman in particular that sent out a letter to her husband and like a year later found out he just decided to leave or go off with some other woman, or in some cases the person would be dead. So it's like sending out a letter to someone and waiting to hear back must have been just a total mindfuck back then.
Definitely. We can't imagine that right now at all. Like we can't even go with 2 minutes without Wi-Fi. Like that's everything.
Exactly. Yeah. I rationalize my addiction to Wi-Fi because I'm doing podcasting, but in reality, I'm just using podcasting as an excuse to stay online to feed my addiction.
Okay. Well, that's a good one. Podcast never been.
And it also, when I was reading your article, I was thinking about the fact that and this is just to me, but a lot of the characters that I read about in history, like human beings, but to me, they seem like characters because there's no video of them. There's no there's not the level of detail that there is today where if a movie star or The Weeknd or something or Leonardo DiCaprio passes away, there's going to be all this film, all these photos, all this imagery of them left behind where you can really get a feel, like the person just feels real. And I caught myself thinking that like when I hear a name like Beethoven, I don't even attribute the fact that he had emotions and he was a human being and he dealt with breakups and anxieties and all this shit, because he's so far back that to me, he's just like a name that I should know. Mm-hmm. And I'm reading this stuff about him that you wrote. And I also just started the Leonardo da Vinci autobiography by Walter Isaacson, and just like all this detail about people's lives back then, even average people, like even if it was just someone who we don't talk about today, there was so much shit back then, and it seems like it's harder to connect to it. So that's also why I enjoyed reading the article, because it was a reminder that all the shit we're dealing with now also existed back then, even more so to some degree.
Yeah, I would say it was a reminder for me. It really conceptualized him as a human, like you were saying, humanized him in so many ways where I was just fascinated hearing, like researching and learning him. But it's funny that you talk about like Beethoven being a character, and it's true. Like people back then, like especially like people of greatness, are like synonymous with just being great. It's almost like Beethoven's a figure of speech more than a person. So yeah, that was fun to do, to really like see this was a human. Like even as great as he was a human, and it was inspiring too. So I'm glad that translated, because that's what I was hoping people got.
Yeah, it definitely did, and it's weird to think about that when you become celebritized and you're someone in history like Beethoven, there's also this big aspect of dehumanization, because your name gets put in textbooks, and you're in grade school, you have those, 4 or 5 bullet points about Beethoven's life, and you study all these characters throughout history, and their most remembered accomplishments in a way are the least human aspects about them, because no one can really relate to writing symphonies that way. Like, only a few people throughout history, and then all the other stuff that people deal with on a day-to-day basis is forgotten. So it's like this weird back and forth of the more famous you become, the less human you become in a lot of ways to the people who are going to read about you in the future.
It's true. But I think that's why so many people love Kid Cudi, because I think he's like lauded up on that platform of you're so famous, you're so great. And I think he continuously, purposely knocks himself off that pedestal. Like he's like refuses to be someone that's not seen as just like us. And I think that is why Beethoven and Kid Cudi align so much. Because like, let's just think, if social media was back then, maybe Beethoven would have been one of those. Because he seemed to me like a humble person. Like, even though he was great, he seemed very humble to his art. Like, he didn't seem like he was the only one doing great things, even though people might say that. But he was just in love with it. And I think that Kid Cudi shares that same enjoyment and love with his art, but doesn't want people to think like he's now transcended into being some type of famous god. So
yeah, even the way he makes music, what Kid Cudi does is so incredible, and also, and I mean this as the utmost compliment to him, pedestrian. Like it feels like he's speaking and singing at the same time, where it's almost like you feel like you could do that. What Kid Cudi is doing on the mic, you feel like this is something attainable, but then of course when you go try it for yourself and you find out, oh fuck, like the reason it feels so attainable is because he's done it for over 10 years to make it seem easy. Almost like stand-up comedy in a way. Stand-up comedy is such a pedestrian act. Like it's such a every man, every woman thing. You're just up on stage with a microphone, and then people go up and they find out how hard it is and how nuanced it is. I feel similarly with Kid Cudi's music. Beethoven, I'm like, I hear some shit. I was listening on Spotify today, and I'm like, there's nothing like me in this music. Like there's nothing in this music that reminds me of me, but it's still sick to listen to.
Exactly. And with Kid Cudi, yeah, like he is that type of relatability to him, but like even him humming is something that people know him for. But if all of us are humming, like when I do it, it don't matter. Like it's not, he has a specific thing, like gift, skill. And same for comedians like Dave Chappelle. It seems so easy because he seems like he's just, it's like a flawless thing, but it takes practice, and yeah, got to have Did
you see the speech that Dave Chappelle made about Jon Stewart at the Mark Twain Awards?
And he said he didn't prepare for it, and I'm like, you didn't prepare for this, and this was great. This was such a good speech.
If that is true, because he says it in the speech, and maybe it's part of the act of what he's doing. I guess you never know because there's so many levels, but assuming that he did not prepare at all for that, that may be one of the best examples of public speaking ever. Like, off the top, characterization, storyline, callbacks, all in real time in your head without saying or like once. Just the way he tied that story together, that may be the most masterful piece of public speaking I've ever seen. And again, like, even if it was planned, that still doesn't take away from it for me. But the fact that he claims that it wasn't even makes it sit on that legendary stool a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of spoke to his style of how he does stand-up. Because when he does stand-up, he always starts with something, and at the end, it usually is like a ribbon, and it just ends with the thing he started with. And I believe in the beginning, he talked about the Dave Chappelle show, like being the inception, or like starting before Jon Stewart's late night show, and then he made a joke at the end, like, and I got the award, the Mark Twain Award, before you did. Like, just smart things like that. I'm just like, he's so brilliant. I love him.
Hey guys, this is a quick reminder that the two best ways you can support the show are by 1, leaving a rating and comment on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. This is like foreplay for the algorithm because it revs it up and makes our show appear higher in searches. And number 2, you can subscribe to AUXORO Premium at auxoro.supercast.com, where for $5 a month you get bonus episodes and more exclusive content. Thank you for however you choose to support the show. Yeah, like mentioning that he was the lead-in to The Daily Show, and then tying that together for the awards ceremony, saying that I won it before you. Mm-hmm. I was just like, wow, that is fucking insane.
Yeah, it's so good.
Do you try in your own writing and on your YouTube channel, of course, do you try to act like you're just talking to a person in casual conversation? Because I've always wondered what gives people like that sort of ease in talking or speaking. And I like the way you write. It comes off very easy and flowing to read. Do you think about, I'm just like talking to someone like a friend, or I'm sitting on the couch or something like that?
Yes. And this is something, I'm like, this is a skill I learned. Well, honestly, in grad school, I became, like, I sharpened my skills in simplification. Because when I got my bachelor's, it's almost like I have my bachelor's in writing and literature. And it's like, you want to come off so professional, and you want to come off like you know what you're talking about. So you might use certain colloquialisms and that maybe people don't even know about, or you might use $10 words, or just because you want people to take you seriously. But within that, you can lose a whole half of your audience because they might think you're pretentious. They might think you're trying to be haughty or whatever. And I realized when I was in grad school, specifically when I took, when I got accepted into Ta-Nehisi Coates' writing course, and there's only 10 of us in there. And I say this and it sounds cliche, but this course changed my life with writing. When he told us a whole lesson, but one thing he said that stuck with me was, don't do this to your reader, do this. Like, he's like, make sure that you are writing something that's enjoyable, that's beautiful, that gets them excited. And with that, you have to make sure they understand what you're saying. So even if you're using these $10 words and to you, it makes sense. Think, okay, if someone else doesn't use if this is out their lexicon, how can I simplify that down? And it might take more time. And with this piece, with the Beethoven stuff, when I first was writing it, and then I was writing the Kid Cudi stuff, it kind of clashed because it kind of sounded more classical in the sense of how I was writing Beethoven versus Cudi. And I'm like, no, it
Mm.
has to flow. All of it has to be seamless like this. I have to bring this down a notch. I can't use this word to describe these sonnets that I need to simplify it down. And then I'm like, okay, here's a cool way of showing impact. Instead of just saying Beethoven's impact, find the songs that actually samples Beethoven. Find the artists that, so people are like, oh, dang, Nas, like everyone knows that Nas song. And then you connect. Someone might not even have connected, like, oh, that was Beethoven. Oh, the Beatles did. So
Yeah.
I wanted to do that. But I always keep in mind to write a piece that I would want to read. And I want to read something fun and enjoyable and something I would be excited to share with people. And I make sure that when I read it back, it's almost like, well, I've never made well, that's not true. I'm like, I've never made a song. I have written songs, but have they gone anywhere? No. But it's
Yeah,
almost kind of
same.
like,
I have I've made songs that are very tragic and that I will not be linking to this podcast, but I can link to yours if you would like.
I definitely want to hear that. I won't ruin your day with sharing you my music, but I love writing music and poetry or whatever. And that's what I see as essays or articles or whatever. It doesn't matter. It needs to sound beautiful. Like it needs to sound good. And I read everything aloud because I want to picture what the reader might be seeing. I want them to see the illustrations. I don't want to tell them. I want to show them with imagery certain things. So yeah, I want to, all in all, I want my piece to be universally simplified, hopefully, so people get it. And I want it to be enjoyable and fun, no matter the subject I'm writing about.
Yeah, so it sounds like you want to write something that excites yourself, but you're also thinking about the audience and how they're going to perceive that and not wanting to waste their time, if that makes sense. Like
Exactly.
you want them to get something out of it.
Exactly. Because I can't. Yeah, and Coates also said that. He said, make sure every sentence has a purpose and that you're just not doing these filler paragraphs. He's like, because one, that's kind of condescending. It's like you're being like, trust me, like I'll get to the good part. He's like, no, everything should be a good part. He's like, you should, like, why should you tell them to stick around? Like, for what? Like, they can go and listen to a podcast or listen to someone else. So, yeah, that's something I learned. I'm glad it's sticking with me. And it seems to be working. So.
Yeah, so I'm sure you're familiar with the sort of sales format where you're supposed to hook people in and then you give them some information before, but you kind of bury the main message to where you want someone to read a certain amount. And I'm probably completely butchering this approach, but I've seen sales writing where someone's trying to get you to buy a product, and it always makes me feel too much like I'm being sold, so I never really finish it. But then I also see writing, and I would definitely put your writing in this category where you're not getting to the main point right away, but you're also not just like hooking people in false hopes of like a huge payoff. Everything that you're saying to describe something has a purpose, and it's not to get you to read 2 more paragraphs or get you to stay on a page for 30 more seconds for ad dollars or something like that. Like there's just, it seems like there's something so sleazy about sales writing, and it seems they're two sides of the same coin, like sales versus writing to get your attention. But I'm a big fan of writing that gets my attention, that doesn't feel like I'm being sold something.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. That type of writing I do see, and I can tell it right away. But yes, of course, the message that I was getting to was closer to the end, but it wasn't meant to trick anyone to be like, I'm going to make you read until the end. It was to make it that I needed all this information to show the impact of the end. Like, I can tell you the end, but then, and I tell you the rest of the information, it's not going to hit. but it's like a good movie. Like, you got to set it up, and it's also something that's kind of entertainment for you too. And it's just giving you more information to be like, okay, and this is why, the point of this whole thing. So
Yeah. How do you think about that process of wanting to be concise and having a message when you're speaking on your YouTube channel or you're having conversations with people? Because this is something I struggle with a lot, where I have this metronome in my head that's trying to keep a rhythm of speaking, and then I'm also worrying that the things I'm talking about now are wasting people's time in some way, or I'm not saying it as well as I could. And there's no really editing process in podcasting. I mean, if you want, you could go back and take things out, but it's going to take away context from the conversation. How do you think of that process when you're applying it to speaking?
Well, with YouTube, okay, so I had a podcast actually at NYU for the radio show before I had YouTube. And when I would do my script writing for my podcast, I would make sure it sounds like I'm actually just speaking, even though everything's basically written down. But I would just type as I'm talking. And then, of course, you sharpen up with, grammatical errors. But I talk like I was talking to a friend, like you're hearing me talk on the phone with you. Like, that's kind of how I was talking, and giving that information in that way as well. And I apply that to my YouTube, but it's different with YouTube because you don't want to necessarily be looking down and reading when there's a video on you. You kind of have to memorize things, and you do have to, recite things over in your mind, but then let it kind of flow and be like, okay, I know what I'm talking about, and making sure you're having a conversation. So sometimes I'll picture a friend. Sometimes I'll just picture a person. I don't try to think of that I'm talking to a crowd ever. I'm talking to a person, because that's literally who I am talking to. I'm talking to a lot of different individuals. No one's in a whole room together. Everyone's by themselves, or maybe with a friend. But I want to make sure that the tone of how I write is definitely the tone of how I do my YouTube channel. Conversational, simple. And it does take a long time, because certain things that might be complicated, that I feel like this needs to be explained in 30 minutes. But who's sticking around for 30 minutes? I got to figure out how to say this in 2 minutes. And it's hard. But when you do that, people are like, dang, like, I get it. And sometimes it's just using image or something like that. So you have to think of these tricks and get creative and innovative. But no matter what, the tone with me still stays. I don't care if I'm doing someone else's podcast, my own channel, writing. If I am not interesting you with the content and it's not fun for you to enjoy, it doesn't matter how good it is. You'll never continue to listen if you are like, this is boring.
That's why I'm going to take this 2-hour conversation and condense it down into 25 seconds, because I want it to be as condensed and interesting as possible. I'm just kidding. So one of the things that we spoke offline about that I wanted to get into in this conversation is that you founded a Black Lives Matter chapter back in 2016 in Columbus, and I believe you grew up in Columbus, Ohio, or you spent a lot of time there.
It's Columbus, Indiana, but everyone
Columbus,
says
Indiana.
Ohio.
So, sorry.
So, no worries. I would have been shocked if you actually said Indiana. Yeah, Columbus, Indiana, 2016 is when I started Black Lives Matter of Columbus. But I started it it was spontaneous, because it was right after Philando Castile and Alton Sterling were murdered back to back within 24 hours. And I was enraged, to say the least. And I didn't know what to do. But I am someone that, have always admired Martin Luther King Jr., always admired Malcolm X and that whole movement. My dad grew up under Jim Crow in Birmingham, Alabama. My mom grew up in Detroit. So I know their actual history with it. And I've always been fascinated with that era. But I just was like, okay, I remember Dr. King saying something in the Birmingham letter from a Birmingham jail, that he was like, sometimes if you feel this rage, you need to like march it out or protest it out instead of doing something negative or violent. And I was like, okay, I could maybe do a protest. There's never been a protest in Columbus, Indiana in this way. And if I'm wrong, someone will tell me. But I've never heard of a protest as long as I was living there. It's a pretty conservative Republican town. So it's not, those issues aren't really broadcast. So I was like, I can go down to City Hall, get 10 or 15 friends, and just stand there silently with signs and I don't know. I just did that. So I told my friends, I said, hey, I'm going to be down there at 3. I'm probably there until 5. Just bring a sign. We'll write names on it, and we're just going to stand there. And we're not going to shout. We're not going to chant. We're just going to stand with signs. And my friends came. There was like 15 of us who were down there silently. And we are in front of the busy road. So people were seeing us, putting their heads out. What's going on here? And some people were honking and like clapping. Some people were saying, other things that weren't, supportive. But that, I wasn't shocked. But then as I was standing there and time was winding down, I looked at my friend, I'm like, yo, I'm so sick of protesting though. I'm so sick of us making signs when people die. And then what we're going to do, go home? What are we actually fundamentally going to do? So my friend and I decided, okay, let's just see how many people here would like to do something. And we got a private group, Facebook group. Didn't call it anything. We didn't know what to call it. But then I thought about, what about Black Lives Matter? And I looked at their objectives and everything at that point, and it was very, very clear at that stage. And I was like, okay, we can support this. Also, we need to tailor our Black Lives Matter chapter to our city. We can't act like we're Chicago, Baltimore, Ferguson, because we're not. We're a different city, but we can still do things to make some type of change here too. So that's how that created, and we were a group until 2018, until I left for NYU. So,
yeah. So for you, what specifically made those shootings the breaking point to start the Black Lives Matter chapter? Was it is it something specifically that you felt where it was kind of an emotional tipping point where you just needed to start something? Was it more of a practical thing where you just wanted to you wanted to form something that could help move the ball forward? What was the motivation at the beginning, besides the obvious of stopping anti-Black police violence? What specifically made that those 2 shootings you mentioned the tipping point for yourself?
Honestly, I think it was probably all that. But when I saw the Alton Sterling video, it was on CNN, I was already upset. But then I went on YouTube, and there was an extended, unedited version. That was crazy. Because I don't care what people, what side you are on politically, that video showed them working out their alibi, at least one of the officers working out their alibi when they were shouting, oh, he has a gun, or we need to get the gun. But you could see that they were pinning him down, and it was almost like they needed this audio to create this narrative of a struggle when really he was powerless the whole time. And then he got shot. And I cried. I was just crying, and I was like, what is going on? So feeling that, then waking up and seeing Philando Castile was murdered, and then that was going everywhere. Literally murdered for obeying what the officer said. And then you learn about the fact that he left the daughter behind. Then you learn he left his girlfriend behind. You learn that he was someone that was trying to make change in his community. He was a man, an honest working man that was a lunch server at a local school. And all these things, you're just like, this. And then I started thinking, this can happen to really anyone. This really can happen to anyone. And I just felt like I at that point, I wasn't like, I need to start an organization. I said, I just need to just get this out and say something. And then the organization started. But why I wanted to do that was, I think at that point, I was like, if we can get the community, even though we act like we are a very, very inclusive town, we're not really inclusive. All because we have diversity here doesn't mean we hang out with each other or that we talk with each other. So I was like, people need to just get to know people, because what if those police officers knew Alton Sterling? Like, they really policed the community, but they did events maybe to get to know the community. And like the gas station manager there said, Alton was always out there many days, always selling CDs. And so if the community officer or if the officers got to know the community, where they might have known Alton. So when someone made a call like, oh, there's a man out here and I don't know what he's up to, they would have drove up perhaps and saw, oh, it's just Alton. We can just easily, or the same with Philando. You don't like, I'm like, people don't even know who they're policing. We don't even know who are policing us. And so I wanted to bridge that gap.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said, your observation about Columbus being a diverse place on paper, but people not really mixing together. I've thought this about New York City because I live in Brooklyn. Obviously, most people think of that as an extension of New York. Unless you actually live in Brooklyn, then people are like, I'm not from Manhattan, I'm in Brooklyn. But if you put that together, a lot of people who are outside New York think of it as this incredibly diverse place, which it is. There's 8 million people of all different races, backgrounds, ethnicities. And the subway is the most diverse place in the city because everyone gets on the subway. But in a lot of ways, when people get off, a lot of things are separated, like the finance district, Chinatown, Ukrainian district. Like there's a lot of walls. There's a lot of these kind of imagined borders, and some of them not imagined when you're literally going into a different part of town, which is great because it allows you to go in and be like, all right, this is Chinatown. Like this is this district. But just because you have a lot of different people in the same place packed into this super tight square mileage, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting a whole ton of interaction with people from different backgrounds. It just means that you're going to cross paths at some point, but it's not, it doesn't mean that you're going to live life in a way where you're truly getting the perspectives unless you go to seek it out.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's still a lot of barriers for sure.
Yeah, I love Brooklyn. Brooklyn's like the best. Bed-Stuy. Bed-Stuy, what up? No, I'm kidding.
Shout out Bed-Stuy.
But that's very true. All because you stand next to someone of a different ethnicity doesn't mean you know them. Like, all because you see them doesn't mean you know them. So that was a lot of that happening in Columbus. And it's not to say you weren't pleasant with people, but it's to say that there wasn't a lot of, we could say, organizational relationships. There was a Black organization, there was a Hispanic organization, there's an Asian organization, there's this different political parties, but did we all emerge ever? No. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's also crazy how the same video of someone getting shot, the same extended cut, whatever you want to call it, the actual version, 8 different outlets can pick that up and you'll see 8 different versions of the same exact video. And you can edit and paste and trim to fit however you want to tell that story. And so there are a lot of time, like even when you see something on video, now I always think, okay, I want to see the original version. I don't want to see the version with the CNN logo or the NBC Fox logo in the bottom right-hand corner. I want to go on YouTube and find the full version of this because I know that whoever shared this has some sort of incentive, and it doesn't mean it's a malevolent incentive, but it gives that person an opportunity to change what's being seen. And so it's just such a environment that's rife for editing the perspective that you want other people to see.
Exactly. To be honest, I think doing Black Lives Matter, and then not just doing the work in my city, but then collaborating with other cities and just paying more close attention to the news and politics and everything, and how things are shared. I did see that a lot, and I think that probably really incited my curiosity to pursue journalism. So, and then I did, and I will say, I learned a lot, obviously, in getting my master's, but I also learned how easily the media can manipulate by one word, by one edit, by one clip. It's insane. So, knowing all that knowledge, I try to share it in various ways with the work I do. So, it's overwhelming though. So, because it's
yeah. No, it for sure. It sounds like it. I can't imagine. So around this time, when you're starting Black Lives Matter, and these shootings seem like they're happening left and right every other day, there's a new Black person getting killed by police. Did you yourself, as a Black person, feel a heightened level of anxiety on a day-to-day basis, or police interactions? And if you did, could you talk a little bit about what that felt like? Because when I'm in the car as just a white dude, like, I literally feel sometimes like I'm in that Dave Chappelle skit where I'm Chip in the car and I can just like toss a blunt out the window and everything's going to be fine as long as I'm, generally there, as long as I'm acting fine. Was there an added layer of anxiety that you were experiencing around that time, or still experiencing?
Yeah. And that's it. Full stop. No, I'm kidding. Yes. So I will say, before Black Lives Matter, doing it, I had an anxiety of whenever I got stopped, I felt like I did something more wrong than probably what I was stopped for already. Like if I was speeding, or perhaps I was like, okay, speeding, or maybe my lights out. I always felt like it was something more. So, I just, not even thinking, you're like, okay, stand straight, put the 2 on 2, make sure they see it. Like, and then they let you go and it's whatever, but that initial anxiety was there. Now, after, when I was doing BLM, oh yeah, skyrocketed. One, because I'm constantly, being bombarded by messages of people sending me different videos of other Black people dying here. Did you see this? Did you see this? Did you see this article? And then also I'm consuming it on my own right, making sure I'm up to date. But that consumption is unhealthy. And
it's like, that's exactly what I want to see before I go out at night in the city. It's just a barrage of people getting murdered who look like me.
Exactly.
That's good for the anxiety.
Exactly. But I knew it. They're trying to just be showing they're aware, just making sure if I overlook something or what. I understood why they're doing it. And at first it was whatever, but then I kind of had to make an announcement for people to stop doing that. But the intake of that heightened my anxiety to 20,000 fold. I remember this one incident and perhaps it happened exactly the way I remembered, or maybe it was because I was already paranoid, very paranoid, but also for another layer, not just because of all the stuff happening, but because I'm in a small town and most everyone knew I was the leader of this BLM. And this was during the time where BLM was not trendy to do. This is when we were being called terrorist organization. This is when even Black people. This is
before the Nike commercials.
Exactly. Nike was just saying please don't do it instead of just do it. But it wasn't even just the white community in our city. There's some Black people, other people of color that were asking us to change our name, to a lot of things. So in the beginning, that was happening. But with this incident, this I remember getting stopped, and this is probably a year into BLM. I remember getting stopped by a police
You said you were in a small town?
Columbus is small. It's like...
Okay, this is in Columbus. Okay.
Yeah, like 45,000 maybe, and there's 1,800 Black people. So you can do the math.
Okay.
And I know all 1,800.
a lot. There's a lot of a sunscreen store would do very well in Columbus.
Oh gosh. Yes. But I remember getting stopped, and I was at this red light, and I saw this police officer behind me. And at this point, then nothing had happened. He just stopped. And it looked like he was doing, like I could see in my rear view mirror, and it looked like he was looking at my license plate, and I was just like, kind of like laughing in my head, like, okay, do what you got to do. There's nothing there. And then I just remember him smiling. I saw him smiling. So then I pull off because it was green. And then I purposely I just got in this lane. And when I got in the lane, he pulled me over. And I'm like, I did nothing. I did nothing. So then I'm thinking, oh, now I'm filling in things that might not be true, right? I'm thinking, oh, he did this. He found out I was Brittany King, Black Lives Matter. Oh, that's why he stopped, like all this stuff. So what did I do? I take out my camera and I start filming him. And I'm like, I'm filming you, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, that's fine. But you were speeding back there. I'm like, when? I wasn't speeding. I was like, I don't remember when I was speeding. Can you tell me where? I was like, then why didn't you stop me back then? Why are you stopping me
when
now?
you said when you said when, was it a confrontational when? Because that's the attitude that I have. I'm like, when was I speeding?
I probably did.
Like, tell me, like, do something to me right now.
I kind of was like, when, kind of like that, you know? And he was, saying it, whatever. And he then, gave me a speeding ticket. It was an expensive one. And I then I said, I'm going to, take this to court. We could do the whole court thing. He has a police officer representing him. I have no one on my side. And he starts explaining the story to the judge. And he's like, yeah, she pulled out her phone and she was doing that. Like all of this stuff that was so exaggerated in my mind. And then when I started to try to talk, the judge is like, okay, I heard enough. Miss King, you're ordered to pay, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you're not even going to hear my side. I probably had an attitude, right? But I remember going to the bathroom and breaking, bawling, just like, I did nothing wrong. I have to pay this. Like, now I survived, yes. And perhaps the paranoia heightened everything. You never know. Maybe if I had a different tone, it wouldn't have gone that way.
Yeah, I was going to say, does that make it worse that you're like, is this just typical cop bullshit, or does this have something to do with race?
No, because you never know. And that's the thing. See, this is when, after this time, quietly to myself, I started to just, the way I was feeling, I knew wasn't right. I was like, I should not be feeling this. And I'm feeling this because I'm in this. I'm so stressed. I'm consuming. I'm like, something about this is backwards and weird. And I remember, recalling some research that I did a long time ago on the methods of how they kept not American at this point, how they kept enslaved people during American slavery dependent on their masters, because there are so many more enslaved people than masters, but they never revolted except for Nat Turner and people. But it was one method that they did was when one enslaved person did something wrong, they would not whip them in isolation. They would whip them in front of everyone. Like they would use them as a way of, you do something wrong, this is you. And they created this insidious trauma onto everyone else. So I started connecting like, yo, why is it that all of these videos of black people being killed is so accessible? It's in our face 24/7. It's like, why is this even being able to be shared on Facebook? Why is it when I go on CNN or whatever, I'm seeing the same freaking clip over and over and over? And then I'm getting riled up every time. I'm getting like crying, and I keep like, I'm like, there's something here that I feel is on purpose. So I started just to question how that was, governing my reality, to where if this was absent, would I feel like this? Not to say I shouldn't know that these things are happening, but if I wasn't bombarded with this every day, would I feel literally like on the defense every second? And it wasn't just police. Someone said something crazy to me. I was ready to just... But the thing is okay, let me rewind. See, I'm getting upset now. Okay, let me rewind.
Yeah, this podcast is just purely to upset you. This is my main goal. I'm just trying to start some shit in the podcasting community. There's gonna be a big payoff, like a boxing match between us, like Jake Paul and some other celebrity. We'll start the podcast boxing mixed martial arts.
That. You're like, I'm going to just make her think about that, Kid Cudi, and then I'm just going to completely go in.
Start with the soft stuff and then just go in hard. But
this is fun. But no, I just, the thing is I do believe in like non-violence and everything. Like I believe King had it right, Martin Luther King. So no, I wouldn't be popping off at everyone. But if I felt, I would do it in a way that maybe wasn't the best way. Like if someone asked a question that I felt like they could literally find on Google, I'd be like, better if you might Google that or whatever. And then I started thinking like, is that right though? I'm like, if someone's coming to me to get information that they really don't know, should I be telling them to Google it? Because that's pretty condescending. I started thinking, now what? I wasn't saying this out loud because I knew a lot of other people doing it, but I'm thinking, I don't think this works.
It makes sense. It makes sense though, because if you are constantly subjected to a barrage of videos or audio clips or a combination of both of something that is a possibility that may happen to you, and you become aware of it, the question is, how many more videos do you need to watch, or how is watching these videos benefiting the way that you are going to live a safe and fulfilling life after you're already aware of the possibility that it's going to happen? And I don't know what that's like to watch, videos of people getting murdered that are black because they don't look like me. Like as a black person, I'll never know what it's like to watch that. But my dad actually does something to me when I travel or I'm doing something that's relatively risky, but more just risky for my parents because everyone has different risk tolerances. I'll go snowboarding, or I went down to Colombia in South America this past year, and something my dad always does, whether he realizes he's doing it or not, is he heightens my anxiety because he will think he's doing me a favor by sending me the most horrific news that happens in that region. And he's like, watch out, 4 tourists got their heads chopped off by the Colombian cartel in this jungle. It's 250 miles away from you. Or 4 snowmobilers just killed an avalanche 2 miles away from where you're staying. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
I'm aware that this is a possibility. Like I'm already aware this is a possibility. And I know my dad is simply doing it out of some anxiety within himself.
Exactly.
To share in it with me because he's like worried about it. I'm already aware of these possibilities. I'm aware that even though the cartel is nowhere near the height of its power, that it still exists in Colombia. I'm aware that people die in avalanches. I don't need 14 articles about this before I go somewhere. At that point, it's taking away from my experience. So if I was going to compare watching Black people get murdered unjustly as a Black person to something in my life that I could relate to, that would be the closest thing I can think of is my dad sending me articles of shit that statistically is improbable, but like it comes from a good place of him trying to make me aware.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's a related connection. And with that, when I really saw it was unnecessary for me to see these to see the videos. It was so unnecessary. I could read an article and understand it. Like, I saw enough. And I made an announcement, I think almost when I was leaving. I told everyone, I'm choosing never to watch a video like that again. I'm asking people to stop sending me that. And I said it actually, I think, is inversely normalizing Black death to people to constantly see us dying. And I don't want to see it ever. And I have never watched a video. I've never watched George Floyd. I've never watched it. I don't need, like, the George Floyd thing was disgusting. I didn't need to see him actually dying to know it is disgusting. Like, I didn't need to see it. And so, yeah, I will never watch a video like that. I'll never watch anyone dying because I don't need to see death. No.
Definitely don't check your phone for the message I just sent you for this next question. No, I'm just kidding.
I really thought my phone oh no, he did not. Oh
yeah,
no,
just a compilation. But going back, yeah, it's like some sick, twisted self-hate thing. But going back to the anxiety in front of cops, I'll go out on a limb and say that if you were to average the amount of anxiety of Black people and minorities versus the average anxiety that white people experience with cop interactions, the Black people, minorities are higher, probably. Like, I don't have evidence to support that, but it seems like it's certainly in this society. And the first time I truly experienced one of my friends who's he's half Puerto Rican, half Lebanese, used to teach me Muay Thai until he left to California. I won't say his name because he enlisted in the Army, and I don't know if he's going to get in trouble for this, but he's like very badass, could kick the shit out of me. When we would spar, he's going like 40% and I'm going 100%, and he's still just like dodging everything and blocking everything that I'm doing. And we were walking away from the park by my apartment in Brooklyn, and we passed a few police officers that were standing outside of the F stop by my house, the subway station. And I was like joking. We were joking about something at the time that was related to weed. Like, we were talking about smoking weed, doing mushrooms, like doing something like that. And I was joking very close to the cops, and he like hit me in the ribs like pretty fucking hard. And it was like, yo, shut the fuck up. Like didn't want anything to do with that in front of the cops. You know, dark brown skin, half Latino, half Middle Eastern. Like, the cops can make him look like whatever they want, and in their own head. And that was the first time as a white person where I was like, I truly was like taken aback in that moment. And I thought, wow, like, this is what it feels like to not be white in front of cops in this instance. Like, everyone's experience is different, but like, I would never think twice about making a joke about smoking weed if a cop was near me, because I'd just be like, I don't have shit on me. Like, what are they going to do? And then he was in that moment, I don't want to say afraid, but was like, I don't want any trouble. Shut the fuck up. Let's walk, get further away, and then we can start talking about what we're talking about. So to me, it was just interesting. And the incident that we were talking about reminded me of it.
Mm-hmm. I understand exactly his punch there to you, because it's like, yeah, we don't have anything. We're seemingly innocent, but that little thing can have this narrative of why they're going to search me. Maybe not even you. They might search him. They just need some reason, like, oh no, you said you had weed. Let me see. And then they could just mess around with him, and then you don't know how that would escalate. Yeah. Yes, I understand that. 100%. I would have punched you too. Okay.
Yeah. No. I mean, he explained, he was like, yeah, it's different. And we actually spoke about that the next session we were training, and it was really interesting to hear his opinion. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of that Dave Chappelle skit where Dave's in the car with his friend Chip, they're on the street corner and they're trying to get directions, and Dave's with his friend. And he's like, "Oh, I don't know where we're going. Should we ask someone?" And I'm just paraphrasing the joke. And Chip's like, "I'll go ask the cops. I'll go, figure out what we're doing." And Dave's like, "No. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And Chip walks up to the cops and he's like, "I'm a little high. Where's 3rd Street?" And
yeah, that
the
wasn't
cop,
Killing Me Softly, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And the cop's
That's-
just like, there's 3rd Street. It's fine. And the whole joke is that he's just fascinated with the way that his friend's able to just walk up and admit he's high to the cops and ask for directions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I love, and that just speaks to Dave's brilliance, because he talked about the actually kind of what happened with you and your friend, and he like has this joke to showcase that in a way where you can get it, you're laughing, but then when it sinks in, you're like, dang, that is true. Like, what if, like, could a Black person be like, I'm high, you direct me to the street? Who knows? Probably not. But yeah,
they'll direct you to this. They'll direct you to the
car.
Street under your feet very swiftly.
Yeah, they'd be like, you can get in the back of the car.
Yeah.
Hurry up.
Going back to BLM, how did you see the organization change as a whole from what you were observing while you were still a part of BLM in the organization, and even after keeping tabs on it? How did you see the organization evolve strategically, media-wise, with messaging and things like that? What was that evolution like from your perspective?
Well, funny enough, I think I've talked about this on another podcast, but to me, the most organic stage of BLM was like 2013 to the middle to like 2017, let's say. And this was actually during the time it was really difficult to say that you were a part of the BLM. But I think that's why it was more on a mission of objectives of, investing into the community, divesting in things that aren't helping the community, anti-police violence, like just objectively fundamental changes that should happen that I think all Americans would be like, yeah, we'll get on this. Then as I think when it got popularized and trendy, people started being a part of the helm of BLM and direction. And it's like maybe a business here or an organization here would pour into BLM fund wise. And then they might be like, oh, can you guys also talk about this? Or can you guys like have these other initiatives? And then muddying the waters of what BLM was doing. And then I saw the cultural conversation different. And this is when, in 2018, is when I really was like, I don't know if I recognize what's going on here or if any of this is actually going to help the Black community. So certain things that was going on that were very popular narratives was white silence is violence, and that in conversations when we're talking about race or social issues, white people need to be silent. Like people call her need to talk, you need to not talk, nothing, do the work, stuff like that. And I started thinking like logically making sense of these. I'm like, does this make sense? Because so at a protest, we want people, their silence is violence. So we want them just to scream out a name or say Black Lives Matter, say their names. But then when we go in these rooms to talk about racism and talk about what's happening nationally or locally, we don't want them to talk, and if they do ask a question, or if they do get emotional, or if they do want to be a part of the discussion, they're centering themselves. It's white fragility. It's white tears. It's like all this stuff. And I start thinking like, but low key, like they should be a part of the conversation, because the racism is not just something that only involves minorities. It involves everybody. So they need to be talking with us for us to understand what's going on here and how to make a change. And if we want equality, and if we want to have this reconciliation, we can't do that with a whole group of people being silent and never being able to express how they feel. Or like you have to at least let people talk and you can challenge what they're saying. But to say you can't speak because of your color is exactly what people said to us. And I was just thinking like, okay, I think this is backfiring on the mission. I don't think this is helping. And also I was seeing it's actually creating an escapism for people to do this performative allyship. Like it's just go to the events and be there for us. And people will be like, all right. And they take their Instagram picture and they post it, deuces, and that's it. But, and then I would get upset by that. But then again, it's almost like people either, even if it was just for their ego or if they're really earnest and like, I want to make change, people want to showcase like, I'm not trying to be a part of the problem. So if they're like, I can't have this conversation and tell and express myself, then I got to show it somehow. So people then are going to post themselves somewhere because they want to see like, see, I'm good too. Like I'm doing, I don't want to, you know? So I just saw how all of this just wasn't making sense. And then I went to NYU and then I started on an academic level, I guess you could say, looking at the race conversation happening and examining that, and then making essays and articles and stuff in grad school and out of grad school. But the most authentic stage was when there was something to lose if you were doing BLM. It was like people really were doing that for a real cause. And then when it got trendy, it was like those people are still there. And now a lot of other people are like, oh, it's cool to be in BLM? All right, cool. Bet. Here I am. Jeez. And these people are there for maybe that day. But it was like this flood of people just coming in and kind of co-opting the whole thing. And now I'm seeing Netflix with BLM on their thing. And I'm seeing all this stuff. And I'm like, what is, like, this is so bizarre. And then I'm seeing like actual, like dead people on people's shirts. Like, I don't know who was the first one, but like, you know, Tamar Rice or, you know, Sandra or, Trayvon Martin, like these people being on people's shirts that were being bought. And it was just weird. I'm like, why is Black Death being like on merchandise? Like, and then you're saying capitalism is the problem. Yeah, sensationalized, and you're saying capitalism is the problem, but then you're selling shirts of Black Death. I mean, that's really what you're doing. And then the money isn't going back to the families. I mean, it's going to you. It's so weird. And so I started just questioning BLM. Big question mark. Then in 2020, my mind shifted when I saw that the protests weren't just happening for a week, because usually that's how long protests were happening. I'm like, oh, wow, it's like 2 weeks, 3, a month, 2. Oh, wow, it's in like Japan, it's in Germany. Like it was jumping abroad. And I was like, this actually might be a change here. Like, this is crazy. But then certain things were happening where I'm like, maybe not. I remember 2020 in Portland or Washington, D.C., one of the two, there was a BLM that actually mostly made up of white allies. I say how allies vary like this. And they were wearing like Black Lives Matter shirts, and they were marching downtown. And this is, you know, during the pandemic. So people were eating outside and they were destroying the stuff. They're like, put your hands up and say Black Lives Matter now, or you'll be a white, or you're a white supremacist. And if people wouldn't do it, they'd be in their faces chanting Black Lives Matter and telling them to put their hands up. And I'm thinking, there's two things there. I don't want anyone to be forced to like me. I don't care. Like, I don't want anyone to be forced to say I matter. I don't want that to be mandated, because that's not real. It's fake. And two, you aren't allies doing this, because in the news, when they say a Black Lives Matter group destroyed a whole restaurant's, you know, location, people are automatically going to think it was Black people. And And most of these people I saw were white. So I was pissed, to say the least, but I was thinking, okay, Black Lives Matter, the National BLM will say something for sure. Week
Yeah.
goes by, say nothing, and then I'm like, why aren't you guys denouncing this?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'll start by saying, as an outsider to the actual BLM organization, I wasn't in the organization, didn't go to rallies. I support the flourishing and the betterment of Black people's lives and people's lives in general. But I was not part of the BLM movement, but I would see chatter online. I'd see chatter on Twitter, YouTube, just, scrolling shit like that. And, it's impossible to ignore, and I don't think it should be ignored. And from a human being perspective, it's good to have your finger on the pulse of what's going on out there and how to react and respond to people. And as a content creator, it's also good to be able to have conversations and understand where other people are coming from. And I remember feeling back around 2015, 2016 timeline, right when I started podcasting and sort of paying attention to the movement, it seemed like things were much more consolidated into, we are against anti-Black violence of police and anti-Black violence in general. And a lot of the messaging I was seeing was around that sentiment. How are we going to prevent Black people from getting killed by police? And then as time went on, it seemed like the lines got blurred to where I was confused exactly what the primary cause or primary causes of BLM was: socially, financially, strategically. It was, hearing things like the money from the national chapters is not being given to local chapters, seeing different things about strategies and things that have nothing to do with anti-Black police violence, like the silence equals violence, things like that. And then along those lines, once it became more popular, which is also when I saw the lines start to get more blurred as to what the true mission was, these corporations started coming in. And my first thought was, okay, if Wall Street, if Nike, like all these big corporations that have a shit ton of money and their own interests at hand, if they're all going full in on Black Lives Matter, what is the ulterior motive here? And I'm not smart enough, I don't have the resources to actually dig to the bottom of that, but I was thinking, like, what sort of protection are they after? Why are they all of a sudden choosing to get in now? Why not back in 2013? Why not before the movement started? Why not start a movement of their own? What is behind all this money being pumped into Black Lives Matter? And yes, there are a lot of people that want to do good things with that money, but there also, you can't deny the corporate interests in the mix of people who want to throw up that flag and signal that I am in support of this, which does two things. It gets your attention, but it also distracts you from something else. So my head automatically went to, like, what do these corporations want to distract from? What's like this hand waving kind of, what do you call it? Like, just, I can't think of the word, but kind of like waving over here to distract from what's going on in another spot, because you're not really able to pay attention to two things at once. And then with all the social media stuff, when it started to become more popular, not just at the corporate level, but at the private level, which is the person to person individual level, which is probably what drove the corporations to start pumping millions and billions of dollars into BLM. On an individual level, it's never been easier to craft the perspective of how you want others to view you. where you can post something, you can post yourself at a rally, or you can post a quote, you can post like, and I do this with podcasting.
Black box.
Yeah, black box. Like I struggle with this in podcasting because I want to appear professional and legit as a podcaster with the posts, with the images that I put out for each episode and as a whole. And sometimes I get caught up in it too much where I'm like, is my goal to seem like a great podcaster, or is my goal to make good podcasts? Which one is more important? And if I worry too much about the image of the podcast, the actual podcast suffers, but the image of the podcast is certainly important as well. Yeah. So it's just all of those things, the corporatization of BLM, the individual manipulation with social media and algorithms around BLM, and also just the lines getting blurred. It was very difficult to get a feel for what the organization was. Like if you were to give a 1 or 2 sentence elevator pitch on this is who we are and what we do, that started for me to get really hard to do when I would ask myself, like, what is this? Like, what is this movement? I know what it started as. I know what I support. Does what I support align with what this movement is now?
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly what I was observing. And I want to ask this. Do you remember, I think it was like 2016 when people started wearing those safety pins?
Yeah, kind of. Like I forget allies? Specifically what it was. It was an allyship thing.
It was an allyship thing. So it was more so, I guess you could say, putting it in layman's terms, white people wearing these safety pins during the time where the inception of BLM and when like things start to be more vocal about like anti-police, and these safety pins people would wear to show like, I'm an ally. And it was more an image thing. Not to say that they weren't willing to do something, but it was just like, I'm an ally. And that's what I felt like Black Lives Matter turned into when it started to become trendy. It just became a safety pin for organizations or big businesses to put on their figurative wall, so to speak, or advertisements, just to safety pin themselves from cancel culture, from being called out. Also, because BLM was trendy, it was lucrative. So people would actually get a lot more business. Netflix might get more subscriptions because they have BLM on the face of their main page, but Hulu doesn't. So I'm going to go to Netflix now. Or, even L'Oreal was saying something. And I'm like, not to say you shouldn't say something. There's a fine line between authentically saying things and then literally just putting BLM on your thing and like having this generic little quote saying like, we support Black, like, but then, okay, cool. But what are you doing like with your funds to fundamentally support? But then again, what they would do is they would give to the global BLM, and then now BLM, the global, organization has 60 plus or $90 million at this point, and which people are upset about it on both of the aisles of the political spectrum. But a lot of people, like chapters, were calling them out, like far before now, like
at the local level.
Yes, there was a New York Times, I believe it was New York Times piece where 10 chapters from different cities came together and wrote an open letter to the national BLM asking where are the funds. They're like, there's homeless people still in our cities. We still need to restock our food pantries. We still need to do this. And you guys have not given us nothing. We've been chapters for years, and we've not heard anything from the leadership. Who's leading, and where is the funds going to? They started that conversation, and then now it's more popular, and now that's been exposed. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think the cap getting blown off that was the $6 million house that was purchased on behalf of BLM out in LA, or 6 million, wherever it was, which could, like, again, I don't know all the details behind that. I'm all for having a party house. Like if I had the budget and I could dedicate part of my budget to having a base where people could just go have fun, get away, like network, shit like that. And also hold up my end of the bargain with what I'm saying to people is the mission of my organization. 100%. Like, go fucking, like, buy a house, party, have a base, and then, like, also do the other shit. But it didn't look good, especially at that time. Like, I was just like, yeah, like, this could be bullshit, but, like, the optics are just not great, especially when all this other stuff coming out, to have this as an investment.
Yeah. And it didn't look good on so many levels. This was during the time where the families of the Black lives that were lost were actually coming out and being more vocal. Hold on a sec. My computer's like, I'm about to die.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
But there was, I believe, Tamar Rice's mother, Mike Brown's father, and a few other people were talking about how they have not received, like, they received support, like, right around the time their family member died, and it seemed like these people were utilizing them or exploiting them, from the news circuit. And then when that would leave, they would leave. They also were talking about how it's re-traumatizing to see their loved ones that passed away, like Tamar Rice or Mike Brown or whoever else, like, on shirts, on memorabilia, in the new, like, and just re-seeing that, and people making money off of those images. They were being outspoken about that, and then people start saying, yeah, that is wrong, or yeah, like, why aren't people paying attention to you? And then, like, people were saying, like, this conversation was going on, and this didn't really hit the mainstream circuit. But I actually tried to reach out to Tamar Rice's mother for an interview, but she was bombarded, But yeah, like, there was so much going on there, and we could be clear about this. And it was Patrice Cullors, one of the organizers who had the $6 million home. But she has written books and she sold books, so who knows how much money was poured in there. But when $90 million seems like it's not being touched to help anyone, but then we're questioning that, and then we see, okay, here's a $6 million house, and here's another $1 million. Then yes, you're creating a horrible narrative of, okay, you're hoarding the money and you're using it for your leisure. It doesn't look good at all. And there wasn't, to me, a really good explanation in my eyes. Especially, never mind. Never. I won't even
I'm gonna ask you a very loaded question and impossible to answer. So, with your, you were once a part of BLM. You've written about racial issues. Someone who has their finger much more on the pulse from a creative standpoint, like being able to speak and write about things that are going on in America within that vein. How racist is America today? Because you could find any answer you want. You could find 0. You could find 120%. Like, with what you've seen and experienced, and trying to answer this impossible, probably stupid question, how racist would you say America is at the moment?
So thank you for preparing me, saying it's loaded, because it is. I don't know if I can describe America's racism based on my own experience. I will say this.
Of course.
I will say this. When people say America is racist, you can look at it this way. America is racist. America is beautiful. America is, has this exceptionalism to it. America is one of the greatest countries living. America, like, all of these things America actually is. America will always have racism. That's it. Full stop. That's what we will have. Now, to say America is the same level of racism, say what my ancestors had to go through American slavery, no. same amount of racism even during the Jim Crow era. One could debate that and say it's more covert. But I would say for me, I can't compare my experience to my father. So what he has told me, I can't say, yeah, it sounds the same. No, it doesn't. Not at all. I deal with racism, but it's not every day. But I think on YouTube and like being a content creator is different because you can get it anywhere from anywhere in the world, really. Now day to day, no, I don't experience it every day. But here's the thing, and I talked about this on a podcast, and actually this moment and it was viewed a lot, like over 100,000 times on someone else's podcast. And sometimes even if something isn't racist, like objectively, you can't call it. Sometimes because you have dealt with it for so long, like you know it's there and you've dealt with it and you know how it can look. Sometimes you don't know. It's subjective. You're like, is this because I'm Black? Or is it because they actually didn't see me sitting here? Like, am I waiting here because they're just ignoring me because I'm Black? Or is it because they simply didn't see me? Are they following me around in the store because I'm Black? Or is it because I'm young looking? Are they like all this thing? Now, and some people might be like, see, well, you shouldn't be thinking about race. And, it's really easy to say that when you're not Black. I'm sorry. Yeah. And I know I've definitely sobered up to certain things that I don't think is true anymore about America. But to say, racism, like America is racist, but that's not all we are. And also we're not as racist. So I know that question was asked on a lot. It's hard to quantify how racist we are, but it's here. We've seen countless times still with people killing people because of their skin color. We just saw this happening in a market. Like a man, like an 18-year-old man, and they love to say kid, he's a man, or even 20, I don't know, traveled to find an urban city to kill Black people. That's exactly what he did. He wanted to start a race war, just how Dylan Roof wanted to start one. So one thing I cannot stand is when we have these conversations is people putting it on the people who talk about race or say, like, talk about their experience and say, try to dilute that and downplay that and act like, but are you not aware of what's actually going on? Yeah, there's not a shooting every day, but almost every year there is a racial type shooting. There is. And not acknowledging that. People won't acknowledge that. And that's one thing I cannot stand. And I just said I can't stand a lot of things, obviously. But when people want to talk about BLM and how it's trash and all this stuff and want to have their commentary on that. But then I see these same people not saying a dang thing about these shootings. You're not talking about what just happened to these Black people that died or these Black people in the church. You're not saying nothing there. But you want to talk about how BLM is dividing people. But you won't talk about how these 18-year-old white boys go on the internet and get incentivized to think that because their skin is white, they have pride and they're going to be, people are trying to the minorities are trying to take over the country and they're trying to get rid of the white race and they got to fight for their pride. And all this is out there on the internet. This isn't just, but no one wants to have that conversation. No one wants to go there too, but they want to talk about BLM, but they won't be talking about what could be happening in their own home with their 16-year-old kid getting, radicalized by a group of men that are telling them that, white pride and race pride and blah, blah, blah. They're talking about race with your child in the most disgusting way. But then you're just going to have a conversation just about BLM. have the conversation there, but also let's not be blind and ignorant to the fact that racism is here. Like, but the thing is, we
Yeah.
also, to me, I used to say, let's end racism, let's end, and that is a noble goal, but that's not real. You can also say, let's end murder. It's not.
Yeah. Well, what is real? You mentioned hatred. No matter how divided we become by race or sex or whatever, we will always be united in our hatred of similar things. That hatred is a common theme that runs through the blood of every person. We all have the things that we hate.
Yes.
But on a serious note, you mentioned those tense moments where something could be racism or degree of racism, or it could be something internalized where you are thinking something that it's not, or maybe a combination of both. Is there a specific moment that sticks out to you where there was some sort of experience like that where you're like, is this racist? Like, is it not? Because to me, as a white person, like that seems like the most common thing that we don't talk about. We talk about racism all the time, and when we have concrete evidence of racism, but what it seems like a lot of people experience, especially people who aren't white, are those incidents where like you're not quite sure. It could be, it couldn't be, but like that anxiety in you, that anger, whatever it is, affects the way that you go about your day, the way that you go about that interaction. And it seems like that's happening much more where you don't have a definitive answer to something. Is there an incident that sticks out to you like that? Either something that happened recently or just anything in particular where you kind of felt that on the fence, this could go either way?
Yeah, there's a lot. Okay, so there's sometimes where I've gotten it where it's overt, where I literally, I mean, a self-proclaimed white supremacist, he said he was, drew a picture of me being lynched. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is
Jesus.
And it was like,
where was that?
Oh, he just sent it to me. And the thing is he took the image was from me on doing an interview that was on TV. So he somehow grabbed this still either on the internet, if it was on YouTube, and and used that still to draw this racist caricature of me. Like he colored in my skin darker. He made my lips bright red, bigger. He made my eyes bulging. And then he had this like storyboard, like 4 little things. And it just showed him luring me into like this warehouse with a bucket of chicken and him lynching me at the last one. And he said, yeah, he was like, the message was, he said, lynch yourself, you N-word. Black lives don't matter. So this was like probably 2018.
So this guy didn't just do something racist to you and obscene. He used his creativity that could have been used in a lot of other ways. He creatively amplified his racism through storyboard artwork to send you a racist message. If you Google it,
I'm sure it's still on the internet. It went pretty viral. But
that guy had a very racist art teacher along the way. Something they
were like, now you want to draw the lips like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to be honest, I don't even think about that now because he has no power. Like, I don't even think about that until I'm like, if I'm in a podcast and someone might ask me that question, I'm like, oh yeah, I have an example of racism, but like, subjective stuff happens, but you never get to the bottom of it unless you ask them, was that racist? Or is it because I'm black? Unless you ask. But there's been times where,
yeah, Yeah, I don't think that guy could give a description that could unracist himself
Yeah,
in
I
that
didn't think
moment.
I need to clarify. I
Yeah.
kind of got it. I was like, I understand. Thank you. So like emoji, fire
Yeah.
emoji thing.
Yeah, fire,
Lit,
fuck you.
bro. That was great. Thank you so much. But like, I just remember a lot of times going into like diners that were in surrounding cities of Columbus that where we might not be living, and the stares would be crazy to where, see, my dad is like I have the personality of my dad. So my dad might not say something, but he like to them, but he'll look at you, like if you're staring at him and he feels like you're trying to be intimidating, he will then stare back, you know.
Yeah.
But my mom is very, more calm and, so if my mom gets a feeling, I know it is the thing, and she would think like, what are these people looking at? Like, and it was definitely because they're like, there's no black people really in the city, and then they see us, and then maybe they're looking at us all crazy. Who knows? There was this time, and dang it, I just forgot it. Oh, something happened actually this is when I kind of during the 2020, 2021, I was visiting my parents, and they live in the suburbs, and I was walking this trail that I always, not a trail, but this like route that I would always take. So I knew exactly where I was going, And I remember walking and I saw this truck pulling out so fast out of their driveway. And it literally, this is me and this is the truck, like almost hitting me.
Jeez.
And I I am Christian, but man, I ripped my Beats headphones off so fast, and I was like, watch out, like, yelling.
Yeah.
And I look
As you should.
inside. Yeah, and I look inside and I see it's two older people, and they're laughing. And they're like laughing like that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I was so mad, right? I'm thinking, oh, they did that because, I'm black or whatever, right? So I'm using this example to show that sometimes you could be wrong, but the other times that has happened to me when I'm followed around, I can tell, even if it's not because I'm black, the way you're following me around the store is rude, period, right? But this instance is one where because I didn't do what I wanted to do, which was go right back around like maybe an hour later, and when they maybe were back, go to their house and be like, you almost hit me. What's your problem? Right? The next day I just walked again and I saw the man getting mail the same time I was walking by, and he waved me down, and I'm like, what does he want? And he came over to me and he was like, were you walking here yesterday? And I'm like, yeah. And then he was like, I'm so sorry that I almost hit you. He's like, we were shocked. And so I don't want you to think like we were laughing at you. We were just shocked. We didn't see you at all. And then when we saw you yelling, we were kind of just like, sorry, And I'm like, I appreciate that. Thank you. And for some reason, that helped me in a way to kind of brush off other things. Because I'm like, you know what? Because when those things happen, even if it is racist, I'm left feeling stirred up. They're fine. I'm the one left feeling some type of way. But something about that made me just like, you never know if it is that.
Yeah.
Maybe I could be wrong. And I'd rather just unless it's something so crazy, outlandish, I've said something before, like I'm not afraid to, but if it's something that's so I'm like, I'm gonna let it go.
Yeah,
because I'm not this
that level of uncertainty and having having that stirred up feeling being caused by race is something that I've never experienced and may never experience for the rest of my life. And it seems like it's like walking around with another layer that you get used to. Like I give people plenty of reasons to be pissed off at me and, sometimes call me an asshole, say fuck you, whatever. Like, it's New York. But in my head, I've never wondered, like, is this because I'm white right now? Like, is this because of like someone's being racist against me? That's never been in the mailbag of like me reaching into why this person is calling me a piece of shit. But it's also like when you're walking around with that extra option, when your skin color can be a reason for why someone is treating you a way that you don't want to be treated, I imagine like it kind of just fades into the background with a lot of interactions, but it's still there. It's not like it disappears. It's still there. And I imagine it still adds to the anxiety of interactions, to the uncertainty of outcomes and things like that, because for you, that is an option. You can reach in and sometimes it will come out like, oh yeah, like mailbag says I'm black for this one. Like that's why it was. That's always, it's on the table.
Exactly. And yeah, it's that layer that's there for most Black Americans, and it's nothing that we enjoy. People will see, the thing is though, the way I see it now is drastically different than before. Like, I have matured is not the right word. Sometimes I can see past certain things. I think before it was more like face value. This is what's going on. Now it is more ambiguous, because I'm thinking maybe it could be a lot of other things besides this thing, but definitely race is still in there. But then I might think, well, maybe because this. Before it was a declarative, it's because of that. Now it's more like, so it actually helps with my energy and my peace. You could say that. But it is something that we don't enjoy. So when people are like, oh, they like the victim Olympics, please. I really wish I never thought that. I wish that was never on my plate. I wish I thought, man, they're following me because I'm young or whatever. I wish race wasn't it, because I can't change my color. There's nothing I can do about this. Yeah. And I wouldn't do nothing about it. And I want to say this. When I was I went on this podcast with Brett Weinstein, and he was telling me how he was in this park, and this was during 2020. And he said that there was this family, a Black family, that he saw, happy, doing their thing. And he said normally he would have walked by and maybe even said hello, But he said during that time, it was such tension between everyone, especially with Black Americans and white Americans, that he said, it's better safe than sorry. I better just go around and not say anything, because I don't want them to think I'm a threat. I don't want, And I had this paranoia that they might think I'm something I'm not because of my skin. So I just bypassed. When 2 years ago I would have went through, I'm like, hey, how are you? Yeah. And I said, that paranoia that you felt is how we feel. Sometimes we don't know how people see us to them. We don't know. I don't know sometimes how I'm coming across with someone. Like how he says we're safe than sorry, that I don't. Sometimes I'm not sure. That family could be like thinking that you see them as a threat, or, So it was like that paranoia that you felt just because your skin is, and that you did not know was true. You just thought could be true. And because you thought it was true, you just did another action. I'm like, that's how we feel. There's times where I will drive by a gas station that I feel, if it's in a really, rural area, I'm sorry, I'm not stopping. Because I just don't know. Now, I could be perfectly fine if I go in there. I'm not taking the risk, though. Yeah. And I've learned that even with traveling with my parents. We just didn't stop at certain places. They weren't announcing, we're not stopping here, kids, because we're black. No. But when you grow up in that and then you get older and you start filling in the clues, you're like, dang, that's why we didn't stop there, because of this and this and this. So yeah, it's an unfortunate paranoia that is there. But for me, honestly, because I've dived deeper into culture and with journalism and having conversations with people that I would never have or thought I'd never have, including like Coleman Hughes, including Brett Weinstein, and people I would have made assumptions about, I just was like, I have these conversations with these type of people. So now when I'm in the world, I'm seeing people as individuals than being part of a group that might do something to me or might assume something about me. But I can't say that isn't ever there. It is. So.
Yeah. Yeah. What Brett Weinstein's talking about, or was talking about on the podcast that you guys did together, it sounds like that moment in the park is sort of in line with a joke that Mark Norman tells. Mark Norman's one of my favorite comedians. I had him on the podcast a few months back. And he tells a joke about walking down the sidewalk on the same side of the street as another black guy. But like the black guy actually seems dangerous, like his body language. It's not because he's black. And in his head, he's like, okay, would I rather get stabbed or would I rather seem racist? And like his joke was, I'd rather get stabbed than seem racist. Like that was obviously he tells it, you know, with I'm just paraphrasing the main punchline of the joke. But yeah, he's like, yeah, it's like sometimes you'd rather get stabbed or have something terrible happen to you than the possibility that you want to seem racist or that someone is going to call you out for being racist, which I guess if you're doing something like podcasting or posting, you have to, at least what I try to do is create the best content I can, prepare for it, record it, chop it up, release it. And then I know that by putting out content there in the public space, I am subjecting myself to whatever people want to say, whether it's good or bad or in between. But if there is a reverse paranoia from the perspective of just a white dude, I would say that it's the paranoia that by doing something, I'm going to seem like I'm being racist in some way when really there is some evidence for my actions, but people are going to choose not to acknowledge that. They're just going to see that I crossed the street with a black dude and, you know, be like, oh, Mark Norman's a piece of shit or something or whatever. And, you know, not that I have the type of following where someone's going to take a video of me crossing the street, but it is.
I'm going to. Okay.
If exactly. Yeah. Everyone's watching at this point anyway. Cameras everywhere. But it's like, it's just interesting, like people's interactions and social media is, and the way corporate media approaches spreading information is so fucked for the way that they prey on these anxieties. But if you have a white guy and a black guy that are trying to have an authentic interaction, and the white guy has that sort of paranoia of, oh, I want to say this, but like maybe this person's going to think I'm racist. And the black guy's like, oh, like, is this person saying this because he's racist, or like, is this me just getting in my own head? Try to have an authentic interaction with that. So it's like all this mind fucking that social media does, and just like this kind of sound bite, bullety, like this is the headline, this is what happened, and rage, like click, share. It's like, I feel like it all just adds to that, and eventually there's going to be a breaking point, which has already started to happen, where people just like step away and they're just like, fuck this. Like I want the content I want, and I can tune into it on YouTube or an independent creator, someone that is going to give me the context and not cause me to just like be constantly in this paranoid state.
It's funny to talk about the paranoia you feel, or as white people feel, because I have sensed that But on the opposite end, where I might be thinking I'm just having a typical conversation with someone that's white, but then we might start talking about nothing too deep, maybe referencing race in there, ethnicity, whatever. And it seems like they're going overboard with showing they're not racist, like quoting Maya Angelou and then going into, like doing extra stuff where I'm like, I know what you're doing. You don't have to do all this. Like, but when you speak about it, I'm like, okay, so there's a paranoia, which I've heard this, a paranoia of people are like, I don't want them to think I'm racist, so I don't even know what to say. And like that, the comedian was willing. And
I will say,
go ahead.
I sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to say, like, the example with Brett Weinstein and also the joke that Mark Norman tells. I will say that if I felt that sort of reverse paranoia that I'm gonna seem racist or come off racist in some way, I don't feel that, or if I have felt it, it hasn't really registered to me, which is maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing, that I'm just not aware of that feeling. But I just feel like the podcasting format where you're talking to someone one-on-one, there's going to be so much context in that conversation that I'm not really worried about it. Like if I was performing in front of an audience of thousands of people, maybe that would cross my mind. But in individual interactions, I mean, it's not really... people are going to... I'm going to give people a lot of information based on my actions and based on my words. And I'm pretty confident that if they come away liking me or disliking me, it's not going to be because of a racist thing. Like, I'm almost certain of that. So I'm like, let this person think what they want. I'm just going to say what I'm going to say. I don't want this interaction to be diluted by my anxiety. I don't always succeed at that, but that's been my approach, where I'm just like, if this person thinks this, then like, fuck it. Like, I know I'm trying to come from a good place.
I would rather that than someone holding back because they're like too focused on color. I would rather that, because if, let's just say you do say something, then okay, let's...
Brittany, I don't see color.
You. Okay, this podcast is done, bye. I don't see color at all. This is great. I'm like, thank you so much for not seeing me. But no, I'd rather those conversations, because then if they do say something, then you can talk about that. But I don't, like, for me, I don't hold back. I don't want anyone else holding back. But when you were talking about the paranoia, I started to see linking, like, the performative allyship might be a way for people to literally be like, I am not racist, to have that paranoia be negated. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe that's an incentive for people to perform allyship, because they got to make sure people know they're good, safe, and love Black people.
Yeah, it's like a corporation donating millions of dollars for the wrong reasons. It's like a signal to say that I am the way that is within the Overton window. Do not attack me because I'm in that woke box. I'm setting up a non-racist flare.
Yeah.
Like, you feel like you're drowning in your company's getting all these attacks. Maybe you'll go under. You're getting dragged through Twitter. Maybe someone made a hashtag about you, and then you like fire off this woke flare into the sky in the form of a donation or a tweet, and you're like, I am not one of them. I am one of you.
I started saying, like, when I started seeing like BLM signage in people's businesses, and they were outside the door. I don't know if I said this in an article or podcast, but I just said I was actually in Brooklyn. I was seeing all of these stores having it that otherwise haven't had it for years. And I was just thinking, this, to me, it was similar in a way of, during the 7 plagues with the Pharaoh and Moses, when the ghost of death, and with the blood, and with the people putting the lamb's blood above their doors, and if you have the lamb's blood there, that the ghost would pass you by and not kill your firstborn. And I just like connected that to the BLM signages. Like it was like this pass me by, like don't one, when the riots were happening, like don't harm us. Even if let's just say they were completely not for BLM, but if they had that there, it was almost like, okay, they're good. We're going to pass by them, or even, oh, they're good. We're not going to cancel them. So yeah, I was seeing that too. Interesting.
Yeah. I just realized we're past 4. Do you have another 10 minutes to get into Amber Heard, Johnny Depp a little bit, or we can just end it here?
I have 10,
you're pressed for time.
minutes. Yeah, I have to be somewhere. But
okay,
I have 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, because we'll end off with this, because I watched a couple of your videos that you put out on the trial, and I actually, the one that you put out about Amber Heard specifically, where you were speaking about how she was wrong, but also deserves a place to heal, that actually flipped a switch inside my head where I'm like, yeah, I've been hating on Amber Heard a lot on the podcast and like in my own thoughts, what is this doing to drag her even more? And so I wanted to ask you, now that we're about a month separated from the verdict, a few weeks, something like that, how have your thoughts evolved on this whirlwind of a trial? Because like it was fucking crazy to see 2 people in Hollywood go at it in public in a televised trial. Like, how have your opinions kind of evolved with the distance that we now have from the verdict?
Yeah, I never thought I was going to make any type of video or commentary on the trial, but I started to get really interested when I was watching it, and I was interested like just how court works, and then with the experts coming on and just everything. But then I really was interested with Amber Heard. I did make a separate video talking about how her couching her claims against Johnny Depp in 2016, 2018, and now, how that narrative of believe all women, accidentally helped her. Because during that time when she said it, believe all women was very popular and no one really vetted her. They're like, oh, that happened? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And it happened. Now, Johnny, you're trash. Let's move on. So I made a video about that. But then when I started seeing the comments as I was watching the trial and seeing the comments of people as if they were Johnny Depp, like going in on her, like in a way where I'm like, this is really strange and weird that you guys are so, like, I understand like she's lying and she ruined, and it's fine. She should be challenged with the way people are going in and saying she's disgusting mother, narcissist. I'm like, when have all y'all like went to school to diagnose people? Like, whatever.
Yeah.
But once it was really social media and like seeing like all these clips like of making fun of her. When I won't lie, like some of them were funny, but then it just wasn't funny anymore. I'm like, I just started, a switch in me went on. I'm like, what if that was me or someone I knew, and every day they were waking up to this type of wrath every single day? Is this normal for one person to get every day? I'm like, I would not be surprised if she deleted herself from the world. Like, I would not even be surprised if that happened. And that video was kind of not hard, but I was like, how can I do this video without sounding like I'm taking up for her? I'm like, I'm not taking up for her and saying that she is right, but her humanity I'm taking up for. Because I understand, I've gotten backlash before, and I couldn't imagine it being on this scale. And also, there's 2 sides to every coin. Toxic relationships are very, very complicated and complex, and none of them no one's a whole saint in it, or a whole victim, or a whole villain. But with that video, I just was like, everything's being sensationalized. One, and more so people were being incentivized, I believe, to sensationalize the trial with these commentary YouTubers because they're making tons of money. I mean, there's millions of dollars being made just making comments and commentary on Amber Heard, but specifically being on Johnny Depp's side and dogging her as much as you could. And because people wanted that content. They wanted to see that. And I know a lot of people might have thought maybe looking at my videos, you're going to get that, but they didn't get that. Instead, they got something totally different. Because I'm like, I'm not for the clout thing. I'm not going to be like, oh, everyone's doing that, so I am. I actually stopped talking about the trial because I'm like, I really had a lot to say, but I'm like, I don't want to keep making video after video after video because who cares? But that one I wanted to do because I wanted people to check themselves. Because people love when other people are in misery. Like online. Because when you're online, it's like this weird, like a piece of you is gone. I feel like a piece of people are gone. I'm like, you guys would never say this to another human being's face to face. But online, it's just this safety in numbers to go at someone and to use them as like, to show how, good and moral you are in comparison to this person. And I'm like,
100%.
It was annoying because it was just like, all of you in the comments are acting like you've never done anything wrong. Like you've never lied. Like you've never this. And Amber's actions were disgusting. Yes. Yes. But, whatever. That doesn't make everyone then some type of Gandhis or monks. Like, it just was weird how people were acting all haughty. Like, she is I'm like, you were just yelling at your wife about the fact that she didn't make you the right type of sandwich, my dude. Just kidding. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like you're making a video about Amber Heard and how much she's a bitch, and you're recording a video for YouTube, and then your wife says something in the background. You're like, yo, shut the fuck up, bitch. I'm trying to record a video on Amber Heard. But no, I kind of got caught up in that a little bit because I recorded a couple solo podcasts about the trial where I was trying to stay level-headed, and there were a couple points where I was like, I'm getting too emotional. Like I am, like Johnny Depp's on my team because I'm also a guy. Like this isn't what this is. This is two people in a toxic whirlwind of a relationship, and Amber Heard, the evidence shows that, she crossed the line and got physical, and she defamed Johnny Depp, or they both, I believe the verdict was two-way, where Johnny Depp's lawyer was found guilty of a $2 million count of defamation, and then Amber Heard was found guilty of that $10+ million count of defamation. But like, there's so much shit coming from both sides, and as I'm watching the trial, I had to consciously tell myself, like, be like, no matter how unlikable Amber Heard seems, and all her like the forensic experts and even her own lawyers, like, to me, they're just unlikable. Like that was
they were
objectively unlikable, where I had to remind myself, am I giving this person too much shit in a solo podcast because they're unlikable, or am I responding to what I'm actually seeing, or is it a combination of both? And then, when I heard your take about Amber Heard and how she also deserves a space to heal, and she also, did fucked up shit.
He's human.
Best case scenario. Best case scenario, she goes away for a long time, not like to prison, but just like gets out of the spotlight. She gets a place where she's away from social interactions. She has a better group of people around her, because the people up to that point certainly weren't doing their part, it seems like, to make her aware of whatever illnesses or disorders or actions she was succumbing to. And best case scenario, maybe 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, she gets to a place where she recognizes what went wrong exactly why it went wrong, and she can move forward from that. As a human being, everyone deserves that place to be able to do that. Especially when you're talking about things like a defamation trial between millionaires where like no one was murdered. Like there's no, like, it's a serious charge what they were both dealing with, but it's we're not dealing with someone's life that was lost. Someone's life was deeply affected, but it's not, they're both walking away from the trial as millionaires, which is how it started. And so if she can get a space where she's able to see what happened, what went on, and same thing with Johnny Depp, like he's just not going to walk away from this and be like, I won, like processed mentally, you know, I'm back to even. Like it's going to take him a lot of time too. So I am in support of a way and in support of a world where each side gets their own place and just whatever space it is to be able to heal and to be able to realize their wrongs. Sometimes those people go to prison depending on what the crime is, and that has to be the space. But in this case, you know, that's not the case. But still, everyone deserves some sort of place to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I think that I hope she goes away and works on herself and gets therapy. And I believe I made that video before she went up to testify, because I was like, you know, I was acting as if I was talking to her. I'm like, you have a choice. Just say you lied.
Yes.
Just say you lied. Just say he didn't really do it. You don't go on this, you know, under oath and lie about, like, just turn around. But then I made that reference to Macbeth, and sometimes some people feel like they're in too deep, that the only way to get out is to go deeper in it. And I'm like, she does. It's either go deeper in it or take accountability right now, as she obviously chose the former. And that was so hard. That was cringe.
Yeah. Just say you lied. Find a place to heal and start an OnlyFans to pay off your court fees. That's like the trifecta for her that she needs to.
And you know what? She'd make a lot of money. Low
I'm
key.
just yeah. I mean, like that is the most in demand OnlyFans at the moment, and I'm definitely not the first person to say that. But
yeah, you're not. There's people would but she also just this last thing.
Oh, go ahead.
You know, when Dr. Curry, which I love her, when she talked about Amber and how.
By the way, I was talking about Johnny Depp starting OnlyFans, not Amber Heard.
I'm watching that. But Dr. Curry, when she talked about diagnosing Amber with borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder, I think that's really when my sympathy for Amber kicked in, where I'm like, wow, if she's really dealing with mental illness, maybe this really is what she thinks her reality is. And is this on our side as culture when we laud mental health awareness? And if she really is dealing with mental health issues, is it hypocrisy in our end that we are constantly badgering at someone that's dealing with a mental illness? Shouldn't we actually doing the opposite? And even if you're not saying, come on, Amber, get help, maybe just not saying anything at all. So I started thinking about that and how that whole thing could be, that was conflicting. But yeah,
absolutely.
We'll see. We'll see what happens with her. Yeah. And, you know, best wishes. She's a mother. So
yeah. Yeah, no, it wouldn't be an excuse for what she did. No,
I love Johnny.
If she did,
I'm glad Johnny.
Yeah, if she is mentally unwell, if her brain was wired in a way that wasn't able to process things the way that she's supposed to, and that led to part of or most of what she did, then you start to look at all the trial and the backlash in a different way. If that it was the case, if she was suffering from a disorder, mental illness, I guess that's not going to come out now, but I enjoyed your perspective and your perspective on this podcast. This was a blast. Thank you so much for being.
You're welcome.
Super generous with your time. No, yeah, I'd seriously I feel welcomed, and I feel like it was a great conversation. And where can people check you out? Because I'm gonna link this as well in the intro and the podcast. Wherever you're listening to this or watching this, you can go check out these links, which I highly recommend.
Thank you. Well, YouTube, American Shade with Brittany King. And you can see me on Twitter. I like to share my thoughts there. And that's King Talissa, KNGTALISSA. And then on Instagram, you can find me there. And my handle is b.talissa. Yeah. And then if you just kind of like just Google my name, you'll find out my articles. I write on different things, social media. I write on music. I write on race, social issues. So yeah, I like to dabble in a lot of things.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Brittany.
Thank you so much.